You've written 2 books on haunted places. I'm sure you know more about hauntings other than the ones you wrote about.
Yeah.
And you've had a couple paranormal experiences yourself.
Sadly, yeah.
Can you tell us 1 or 2 of the scariest ghost stories that you know?
I can indeed. And oddly enough, both of these are Catholic. One really isn't too terribly scary. And that's the story of the oratory ghost, the Brompton Oratory in London. I believe, I hope I don't garble the details too badly. But way back in the 1920s, the priest was on duty because there used to be a custom in the Catholic Church. Back when we believed that the sacraments were necessary, you used to have priests on call for dying people.
Oh.
Yeah, I know, it's a weird idea. And the oratories still do this even today. They're really, talking about retro.
Yeah.
But the duty priest, as he is called, is there in the late hours of the night. There's always somebody 24 hours ready to take the call if somebody's dying. So if I remember correctly, he gets the call that normally would go through the front exchange. And this old lady asks him to come quick because the master of the house she's in is dying. And, he needs a priest right away.
Yeah.
So he says, well, all right. And he goes off with her. She's Irish, which isn't that strange, but she takes him to a fine house in Belgravia and then vanishes. He thinks down the downstairs, the servants' entrance.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he's a little bit miffed at being left out like that by himself, and it's 1 or 2 a.m.
Yeah.
So he really doesn't like ringing the doorbell, but he does, and the butler eventually opens up. And he says, what do you want? And he said, well, I understand that Mr. So-and-so is dying. He said, well, that's the first I've heard of it. He's fine when he went to bed. Let me go see. So he brings him in, he runs upstairs. He comes down, he's fine. Now, mind you, he's not that happy at being woken up, but he's happy to entertain the priest. Well, it turns out that he was baptized a Catholic, is raised Catholic, but he's fallen away for years and years and years. And they have a long talk. And the priest offers to hear his confession. He says, well, all right. He does. He's fine health. He doesn't see the problem. And then he agrees to come back the next day for tea. And then they could perhaps speak about getting him, you might say, living a Catholic life again. So the fellow goes back up to bed, and the priest goes home to the oratory. Then what happens? The next day, he goes over to the house, and there's a hearse in front, and everything's covered in black. He knocks on the door, and the same butler said, Mr. So-and-so died very early this morning, sudden heart attack. Went like that. And the priest, of course, was absolutely amazed. Then he sees a picture of the woman that had brought him the night before. He said, that's the one who brought me last night. Well, it certainly couldn't be, sir. That's Mr. So-and-so's mother. She died 20 years ago.
Wow.
So then he went back and talked to the operator at the oratory to see, the person who was on duty with the doorbells and all that, the phones. And they asserted that nobody had called the night before.
Okay, so the phone rang.
In his room.
In his room. Wow.
But the fellow at the desk claimed that no call had come through.
Wow.
So, that's one story. I may have some of the details a little mixed, but that's, I think, pretty much it. The second, another little Catholic ghost story for Halloween, is a very famous one in parts of the world, particularly in West Virginia. Now, we tend to make fun of West Virginia, deliverance country. How can you tell if you're from West Virginia, your family tree has no branches, straight as a telephone pole, that kind of thing. And they make a lot of nasty comments about West Virginia, Uncle Dad, naughty Mom, that kind of thing.
Wow.
But actually, there's a lot more to West Virginia than that. In fact, that's small. And you get the same sort of thing in New England, all right? Some of those old Yankee families out in the sticks. Anyway, I digress. Suffice to say that near Middlesburg, West Virginia, is a place called Priestess Field, which is today owned by the Diocese of Wheeling, West Virginia, and is a retreat center. So you can go there and go on retreat. But it was originally owned at the site of a home of local farmers, and they had a tavern as well. And back about, again, I'm really terrible with dates, but we'll say about 1810 or so, and it was still fairly new settled. A young man came to the door, and they put him up. And he was, had dinner and all that. But, you know, back in those days when there were no inoculations and so on and so forth, people very often took sick like that.
Yeah.
And died just as quickly. And that's what happened to this poor guy. He got feverish, and it was pretty obvious pretty soon he was going to die. So he begged them to get him a Catholic priest from the nearest town, which was Middleburg. Well, these were good Protestant people, so they refused. And he begged them, and they refused, and he died, and they buried him. Almost immediately, they started getting problems. Poltergeist activity, salt in the sugar, things knocked around, broken, and their clothing would get snipped, as though by scissors. And as a result, the thing, the being, whatever it was called the Wizard's Clip. And that's how the story is known today. Interestingly enough, Father Demetrius Gallitzin, the great pioneer priest of the Alleghenies, was called in to see the thing, and he did. And after they tried many other ministers of different religions, and they were all literally driven shrieking for the place. So finally Father Gallitzin gets there, and everything stops. And he says the burial service for the dead man, and he says Mass for the repose of his soul. And that's the end of it. And one by one, everybody in the family converted. And eventually the last of the line left the property to the church, which is why it's called Priestess Field and why it's part of owned by the diocese today. But that is one scary little tale.
Yeah. Wow.
And there are a lot of them. You know, there's another one, I know you only asked for two, but a third that comes to mind. I may have said this at some other time, but in East Hounslow, St. Augustine's Church, I want to say.
What state?
In London.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Interesting story. These are all clerical tales, but a priest had taken ill. It was about, I want to say the 1890s. He'd taken ill, he went into hospital and died. He was the pastor. Almost immediately he started appearing in the rectory library, frightening people out of their wits. This went on for 10 or 20 years.
Yeah.
Finally, the new pastor came. He appears to him. And the new pastor demands in the name of Almighty God what the thing wants. It points at a book and vanishes. So the new pastor pulls up the book, opens it up, and in it is a list of Mass intentions for Masses that were paid for but never said, because the guy had gotten sick and got in the hospital. So the new pastor said all those Masses, plus one for the repose of the old priest's soul, and the ghost was never seen again.
Wow. Yeah, those are good stories. It reminds me of one of the ones I read in your Haunted Castles book when it comes to dying wishes.
Ah.
You know, it seems one of the recipes to really, if you don't get your dying wish granted, you're going to be haunting that place, chances.
Well, sometimes. Remember that for every 100 people who express a dying wish, the vast majority of them, they snuff and that's it.
Yeah. This one was... I don't remember. I think it was in England. It was Gentry class house, and the dying wish in this story was this lady's head had to always be on the property.
Yep. Otherwise there'd be trouble.
And and so, they buried her. I think they did it normally, and she started haunting the place like crazy. And they come up, I forgot the
Well,
rest.
they ended up walling it up taking the skull and just sticking it in the wall and covering it up, and then everything stopped.
Yeah.
So, don't ask me. I don't know. It's like Jeremy Bentham, who was a famous utilitarian philosopher, and was also a fellow of one of the learned societies in London. I forget which one. You can look him up though. Bentham looks like Bentham, and you can see his body on display now. His skeleton was dressed in clothing, his head encased in a wax likeness, and a hat put on his head. So the terms of his bequest to this academy was that all the money he gave them, his bequest, that he be kept there, dressed as I've described, and visible, so you could go see him today.
Wow.
And that he'd be at all board meetings, he'd be in attendance, and that his name would always be called off as Jeremy Bentham, present but not voting. Well, at some point, at some time, so the story goes, one of the new presidents of the organization kind of got sick of looking at this thing, and he had it taken down, put away, and immediately poltergeist activity started. Things started flying around and all this. And he said, you know what, if that's the price of peace, so you can see him now.
Wow.
I mean, there are a lot of stories of this sort, and the thing is, you ask yourself, well, why would it happen on this occasion, not then? There was a very famous writer of ghost stories called M.R. James, Montague Rhodes James, who was a famous scholar and the provost of Eton College in England, but also a crackerjack writer of ghost stories. And he was asked if he believed in this sort of thing. And his response was about the best I've ever heard. He said, these things happen, depend upon them, but we do not know the rules.
Mm.
And we don't. And really, you can expand that further to every aspect. I mean, why does Our Lady appear here and not there? Why is this one given a miraculous healing at Lourdes, but not that one?
Yeah.
There are reasons for it. It's just that we don't know what they are. And to us, it looks frightfully capricious. It's not really. We know our faith teaches us that all these things have a reason, a point, and a plan. But we can't know what it is.